Yeah, well, I live in the Seattle area now. I'm originally from the Midwest. So a lot of these poems were written while I was still living in the Midwest. So I think it definitely has that quality to it. But this first one is my oldest poem. I actually wrote it while I was still living in Portland about 8 years ago, and my kids were really young. And so it might be a little dated, but it's the one poem that I actually won a humor award for. So after it's over, you'll have to tell me whether you actually think it's funny or not. It's called Talking to the Dead on Television. I'm getting a George here, he says to the adoring throng. He may be alive, or he may be dead, but I don't really know. I expect an apparition, or at least the faint strains of celestial music, but I'm greeted instead by comatose nods and one stifled sob from the rear row. They line up like a deck of cards to see the master pull the abusive uncle and the alcoholic father from the grave. All of the dead have something to say. They speak in many voices between convenient sponsor breaks. And I am thinking of Bozo's Circus. Those two lucky children chose to win the bicycle while all the others stew with unconcealed envy. The dead will need to take turns, just as they did when they were alive, because the living are in charge and they demand satisfaction. Did someone's aunt enjoy cooking? The master suddenly inquires. I smell a casserole. My God, yes, shrieks a woman from the front row. My Aunt Shirley baked casseroles every night. Another successful connection to the grave is established in time for a commercial break. Are you over the age of 45? Have you given any thought to life insurance? What would your loved ones do if you were dead? I'm officially in the category of the aged. It's something I swore would never happen because my loved ones would probably be clueless. The laundry would fester in a mildewed pile, the electricity would be disconnected, and our decrepit auto repossessed. And then my family might end up on television, begging to know how long they should cook the salmon, cursing me loudly for shirking my post. But I would refuse to answer. My soul would repose permanently on a tropical beach, glass in hand, blissfully deaf to their pitiful cries, ignoring all requests for me to visit. It almost makes me want to be dead, but not really. Okay. This is kind of falling down.
Nope, slide the hairband down.
The hairband? And this goes up here? Okay, I'm kind of bending down a little bit, but I think it'll be okay. All right, now it's too high. I'm a diva. Yeah, there we go.
Yes, right.
Not really.
She's
All
the
right.
queen.
We're very, yeah, thank you, it's perfect. Okay, when I first moved back to the Midwest 7 years ago from Washington, I went on this like pilgrimage to try to look up like all my old boyfriends and find out what the hell happened to them. And you know, and for the most part, they were kind of doing the same old crap they were doing, you know, like before, like 20 years beforehand. But one of them was dead. So you know, this was really kind of a bummer. I know it's a spoiler alert, but you know, it was I had to write about him because he was so weird. But anyway, this is called word salad. Word salad is when you hear bits of sentences, but none of the words make sense, you explained to me earnestly. We were probably smoking bowls in the front seat of your purple 1972 Gremlin, the floor littered with stems and fast food bags and the occasional foraging parasite. Drivers screamed at you as they passed. It didn't matter what you were doing. Parking, making a right turn, changing the radio, because people were always ready to kick your ass for it. On the last day of 1978, or 79, we drove from one end of Chicago to the other listening to Freebird and Stairway to Heaven while trying to stuff a foot-long bong underneath the passenger seat. 3 months earlier, you woke up in my bed announcing that you had decided to become bisexual because it seemed like the healthy way to be. And then you asked me if I wanted to take a road trip. You wanted me to show you all the places that I told you about, but you had never seen. So we drove to the farmhouse north of Springfield where my stepfather had committed suicide 2 years earlier. No one was home, so we climbed through the window and crept through the rooms like criminals staring at the walls. And then we drove 90 miles to visit my bisexual friend Michael in his trailer in Urbana. Michael was like a Russ Myers character come to life, or a caricature of Oscar Wilde, living on a diet of gourmet food and LSD and group sex. Afterwards, you confessed that you didn't like men, but there was this one moment with one of your hands on my breast and the other on Michael's cock when you were completely aware of your power. Mostly you were unsure of yourself. I called you a spoiled suburban boy with delusions of world domination. Obsessed with Napoleon when you were in high school, you had dreams of joining the military and dropping bombs like anonymous letters. You couldn't understand why I hated you, even though we were such close friends. One night, we fucked in the turret of an empty Victorian building, and I almost loved you in a distant kind of way. But you ruined it by telling me that I only showed my feelings during sex and I was an ice princess the rest of the time. So the last time I saw you, we smoked a bowl under a freeway overpass. We promised to keep in touch, but we didn't. You joined the Air Force, but they wouldn't let you specialize in nuclear warfare because of your marijuana habit. As a consolation prize, they said that you could become an air traffic controller. I liked to think of you making $200,000 a year directing international air traffic with a cocktail in one hand and a fat joint in the other, feeling completely aware of your power. But the fact is that you got a medical discharge for alcoholism and schizophrenia after less than a year. The government talked constantly to you through your dental fillings, conveying urgent, garbled messages that didn't make any sense. You returned to your Midwestern family who corralled you in the den like a dog. They taught you to play a mean game of bridge while you chain smoked and tried not to drink. It was impossible for you to live alone without somebody watching you. One morning, your parents found you on your kitchen floor naked and covered with wounds. No one knew if you had been beaten or you simply had fallen repeatedly. You survived a coma and 2 brain surgeries, only to die in your bed a year later from a fire caused by an unextinguished cigarette, leaving behind 2 children, 3 ex-wives, and a pair of secretly relieved parents. Your mother still lives in downstate Illinois, chain smoking while attached to an oxygen tank, wondering why you were so self-destructive. I would rather think of the 2 of us spray painting the cement wall behind the Adler Planetarium, or hitchhiking to New Orleans in January, being chased by angry truckers and escaping. And I'd like to feel that we both escaped. But I guess only one of us did. And I'd like to think you found your power once you let go of your body. But your body is probably in a rural Illinois cemetery with a bucket of artificial flowers on your head. Not even death can stop you from being a loser, but at least it makes it easier for people to ignore you. Yeah, I have these like these tributes that people have died. I don't know what that says. Well, I keep doing that. I don't know what that says about me, but I've got another one from my mom that I wrote at a writer's retreat in rural Washington. God, it's almost 10 years ago now. So I guess this is actually my oldest poem. It was about 6 months after my mother's death that this was written, and you know, it still has a lot of meaning to me. Maternal advice. Just pour some gasoline on it or light a match, you suggested when I called collect from a North Carolina motel to report a tick nestled in my vagina. The hairs were like uncut grass, thick strands twisting randomly in all directions. The perfect place for an insect to hide. I stared at the tick, who was committing a foul act without my consent. I shrieked and I bounced on the cheap motel mattress while you intoned, "Just don't do both at the same time." Years later, age 40, I called you again for advice about a sociopathic biker that I'd known in Reno who threatened his neighbors with firearms because they parked in front of his house. And you said, "I think he sounds like a common garden variety drunk. I would stop calling him if I were you and find yourself a boyfriend with less time on his hands." You could sure tell me about sociopathic drunks, having been one yourself, with the same fervor that you devoted to raising tropical fish or organic gardening, or writing novels featuring you as the beleaguered heroine in an insensitive world. Chain-smoking gunslinger in an angular female body, you never wore a dress except to funerals or court. Your words tore through the air at 200 miles an hour and bodies flew in all directions. So, as crises appear like unwanted insects, I have no one to call or blame. The room is quiet without your voice telling me to lose weight, to pay my brother back the $1,000 I borrowed from him in 1987, or complaining about how weak you feel from your radiation treatments. It is as quiet as the rocky hillside where we hurled your ashes, which mingled effortlessly with desert dust. The most seamless transition that you ever made. My sister was the first to speak. She said, "Well, alone at last, no one to bother you." But I thought of the sudden absence of your body, the body you despised, starved until it was as thin as a tongue depressor, the body left to decompose like an old engine, once shiny and clean, with such a loud roar. You shielded your body, inhaled smoke to bury pangs of hunger and sexual distress, spent the last 8 years of your life watching television. And you swore off sex completely, even pulled the plug of your fantasies out of the wall because you couldn't stand for anyone to see you naked. Your body is invisible, but your words are as solid and inflexible as the inside of my skull. And I can almost hear them when I remember not to speak. Okay, I've got a couple more. Just wanting to remind everybody that I do have this marvelous chapbook for sale for $7. So, you know, if you're interested in a chapbook, just hit me up. You know, all these poems and a whole bunch of others, plus one short story appears in the chapbook. So it's kind of fun. It's fun to read, I think. Or at least I've been told. I wrote it, so I can't tell. Really. So this next one is also kind of like a childhood memory deal, and it's called Thrill Seeker. She likes to take a running leap off the 20-foot wall into the sandbox, land on her ass, roll like an insect, and then crawl up to the ladder to the wall again. She says it's the most fun, that midair uncertainty, and then the feeling of relief as body connects with earth. One day, she takes her best friend to the wall. Her friend withholds her boldness with aristocratic contempt and secretly finds the girl's eagerness to bolt into the void to be a sign that she is not as smart as she likes to think. That friend will never jump, not in a month or a year. But the girl says, it's the easiest thing. and nothing bad could possibly happen. And to prove it, she's going to take one more leap and show her friend how it should be done. Nothing bad can happen, she repeats, and she catapults into midair, cheerfully flings caution skyward like confetti, and lands with her kneecaps in her face. Blood spills onto the hard sand from a deep gash above her left eye. At first, the girl laughs and admits to being wrong, and then she bursts into tears because it's going to be a long walk home. It's still early morning, and the girl's parents are sleeping off their hangovers. Won't they be surprised when they awaken to see their daughter standing there above them with a wet paper towel over her face, delicately splashed with diluted blood? There will be a long trip to the emergency room before they've even had their morning coffee. The girl will sit under fluorescent lighting while the surgeon reattaches her flesh with deft, indifferent needle strokes like an Amish grandmother sewing an apron. She's stoic now, refusing to cry because her parents expect her to be brave and will surely punish her if she isn't. And her friend sits beside her, vowing never to take such chances, so glad that she never left the ground. But the girl, behind her closed eyes, flinches from the needle's prodding and dreams of the next time that she will jump.
Yes.
Okay, my last one's another warped love poem.
Yay!
my favorite theme. My favorite theme, and it's called Security Guard. It's impossible to tell the whole story, so I'll mention the parts I think are true. Though I know you have forgotten, because you weren't actually there. But there was a figure clad in a dirty suit jacket that I thought was you, although you may have sent an imposter once or twice. There was never a way to avoid the train. I lay on the tracks, daring you to run over me again and again, and you loved it, and so did I. Sometimes I barely made it to the track on time, and you had to wait, but you were always there, idling with the force of your tiny engine while I settled down and closed my eyes. And then you stopped guarding the train and became the train instead. But that's not truth. The truth is this. I drove myself from Chicago to Michigan, my stomach like rancid citrus as the exit signs flew by through Kalamazoo and then Jackson, fearing the green overhead sign that named your town. But the town always swallowed me uncomplaining. I climbed the high stairs to your apartment, past the door that swung inward to a wall, and I could never move forward, only left or right. And never changed. Those gems arranged like ants on your bathroom windowsill, your guitars and banjo perched on floor stands, your futon, your stereo. Afterward, I couldn't sleep, but you never had any trouble. You slept with your head on a mound of blankets, with lumpy cotton blankets underneath your body, facing the wall. I never understood your denial of comfort. You who called me mama and then unplugged yourself, turned away from me and lost consciousness immediately. And then in the morning, you began a series of rituals, shaved your face quickly, talked to yourself in the shower, and then dressed for work in layers of polyester and a clownish striped tie for your job, guarding the grass for a monolithic office building whose name that I refused to learn. I grew to hate that uniform, not for its ugliness, but for what it meant. You were leaving, you didn't care. I would have the long drive home. And I knew that I would make that drive again, just as soon as you asked, and you always did, until the one day you stopped asking. Padlocked the doors, retreated inside. And now, You crouch behind the glass, and you have the nerve to laugh at me while I throw myself in your direction and thrash my fists wildly in the air, as if my knuckles could make a dent, as if I actually knew how to hurt you. All right, thank you very much.